questions to be asked. There's a story that has hurt my feelings kitoko, or rather it's made me sort of question an end of an era as the state moves to close down children's homes. That's the front page of the Daily Nation. About 1,000 children's homes will cease to exist following an order by the state that explores new ways of care for this vulnerable group. On page 2, it says there that the government, through the National Council for Children's Service, introduced reforms seek to introduce family and community-based care. Research shows that institutional care has long-term negative effects on children. Family and community-based care leads to better outcomes. And the plan has 3 pillars: prevention of separation and family strengthening, alternative care options like kinship care, foster care, guardianship, and adoption. And it goes on to take a look at some of the key findings about a study that talks about, basically found that children raised in institutions are stunted physically. They are more likely to have social and behavioral abnormalities, and so on and so forth. It goes on to say globally, an estimated 5.4 million children live in orphanages and other harmful institutions due to poverty, discrimination, and insufficient access to basic services. Well, I think about the spirit of why orphanages were created, and it was to give refuge to children who didn't have an alternative.
Yeah.
I know, unfortunately, it's been bedeviled with issues of whether it's trafficking, abuse, neglect.
Yeah.
I think that's informing some of these decisions.
Yeah.
But again, the transition. You're shutting down 1,000 homes. Okay. Have you figured out the foster care? Have you figured out community-based care? Because that's also quite intensive, expensive, it's long-term. So the reason why I felt heavy about this is it's another case of we need to shut them down and then take them to foster care and community-based care without figuring out those structures.
But
so you've left 1,000 children vulnerable.
What makes you say they haven't figured it out?
I don't think
it's not
they
like
have.
it's not like they're shutting them down tomorrow.
No, they're not.
Because the story is saying this is the plan. This is what the Council for Children's Services is proposing. These reforms, which now eventually end up shutting down. So we are no longer bringing children into these homes. So instead of now taking more children, maybe that's one way of doing is instead of bringing more children into the homes, now we have a plan of phasing it out. Don't bring children into homes. Let's find ways in which we can actually integrate them into families.
But is that what they've said?
That's
or that's
what
what
they're
you
proposing.
hope?
That's my thinking. But the story is saying these are proposals that have happened. I've heard this story before, which is talking about how do we actually stop our focus on having just children homes,
Right.
and these institutions, which end up not really serving the children. The need is there to have children somewhere, but the method of having a children's home is, all studies are showing that it doesn't end up benefiting the children.
Right. I
So
think
find a way of...
Maybe it's how the homes are run and not regulated. Wouldn't that be an option? Because I don't know that there can be a society where eventually we phase them out. There's a reason why they're there. There's a reason why sometimes they're overwhelmed. It's because these children have nowhere else to go. You're saying community-based care, kinship care, foster care, without thinking through, and I know it's a proposal, maybe I just need to see the full scope, because I think saying our option or our idea is to shut them down as opposed to let's enforce regulations and see how we can scale, enhance, and regulate children's homes, because they still stand in the gap somewhere.
Okay.
And, you know, I just...
to your question, Latif, sorry. Let me give you a timeline, for example.
Yeah.
We're in 2025.
Yes.
The state said it would strengthen families, provide safe, nurturing care and transition, to provide safe, nurturing care and transition 70% of children in institutional care to family and community-based care by 2027. Everything you know about how we operate, you think we'll be ready to transition 70% of children in care in children's homes to community-based care and families by 2027? That's an easy one.
You see, that's where my focus would be. Can we make sure that over the next 2 years we are doing as much as possible to get there, right? Because I see the sense.
I do
of
see
saying,
the sense as well.
how do children end up in these children's homes? Some of them, it's they've been kicked out, neglect by families. Now, how do we find families that support them? Because you see, when a child has come into a children's home and this child knows that I was sort of like rejected by a family, there's something that you've done to that child. And then you keep them in this home, they grow up in this home, this is what they know, this is this is a temporary home that I came to. They don't have the care and the love of a family. We go, we visit, we take clothes, and that's it. We just go once in a while.
Yeah.
People just keep coming and going. As opposed to a family setup where they're actually being taken care of and they feel like members of a family. There are extended families who could take care of. There are other people who are willing to take up children. There are people who are willing to be foster parents, to be adoptive parents. But we have just made it so difficult because of our current laws. Let's work on all those.
I mean,
and say the first thing that a child officer does when they receive a case of a child, yes, the child can stay here, but it's temporary. Go to a care home, but it's a temporary care home. What we are doing is we are doing everything possible to integrate this child into a family setup.
And just like in other places, you do your best, but sometimes you find that the options have run out. I would say, yes, maybe have a balance of the two, because again, you've just mentioned it. When you hear and listen about things like adoption and foster, it is very challenging. So now there's an assumption that these children will somehow be absorbed. Family members, extended family, there's a reason why they're in the home. Maybe they say, we can't take care of this child. So it's to interrogate deeper. And while we understand it's not the best case scenario, everybody would want a child to have a home. Everyone. I think every one of us wants that. But realistically, what is safe for this child in the interim before the system figures out where to place them? You know, they can get counseling, they can get, while they're there, trying to understand why they're there in the first place. Maybe there should be some emphasis on that psychosocial support, counseling support, because it might be that they're there for a while, right? We see it in other countries. People stay in, you hope to be adopted, right? But some kids are in foster for like 18 years, you know, because they tried, people tried, they said there's families, they came, they went, they said, some of them even took them to foster and returned them and said, I don't think I can deal with them.
Because some also foster for the money. So it becomes an issue of financial incentive vis-a-vis wanting to care for a child.
I want to hear Children's Welfare Society just break this down, the pros and cons.
Yeah. It's a very...
And the Council for Children's Services as well.
Agreed.
Because I say keep them, but let the mentality be that they are here temporarily. What happens in this country is a child goes into a children's home and that is their next permanent home.
For many children around the world, not just in this country. That's why I'm saying.
Particularly in this country, there is no effort at all.
How do you know there's no effort?
That's what happens in these children's homes, Janet.
Not all of them.
That's
not all of them.
Effort, tell me where the government effort is to reintegrate them to society. The thinking, and this is why we have to change this thinking. Many children go into these children's homes and they will stay here. The effort by children's officers, but let's look for the family. It's not as given as much emphasis. This child came here. Let's try and find out what's their origin. Where did they come from? What's the issue of the family? What can we resolve this family issue? Can we find them a home? Can we find this child a home?
Yeah, so that they don't stay here.
So that they don't stay here. It's for many of these children. They end up there,
and it's home.
That's home.
I've always wondered. I don't know, when you're coming from a place where perhaps either they've been abandoned by family or they've lost family, I don't know what those efforts would also look like now. Is the option to take them back to a place where they're not particularly wanted? And again, orphanages and children's homes obviously have issues, and they're plagued. You've said it, it's trafficking, it's abuse, neglect, all of that. From even a developmental perspective, the report has said, you know what, they do tend to have stunted growth, whether all of that's valid. But is the option to take them back somewhere where they're not wanted, or where people also don't have the capacity to take care of them?
Exactly.